For a great cup of joe, there's one thing you should know. Your morning brew can also be playful. Buff Boy Brewing guys make the temperature rise. And you surely feel naughty when you swallow our coffee. If you want some real heat, give your mouth a fine treat. You will want some more, rest assured. Buff Boy Brewing, you can't get enough of.
It's time for The Scribble, your weekly fix of celebrity chats, bizarre stories in the news, and basic random chatter with best-selling author and syndicated radio host Jeremy Bradley. Make sure your seat is in the upright and locked position and your barf bag is securely in place. Here's Jeremy Bradley.
Thank you very much, Larson. Jeremy Bradley here. This is The Scribble. The big question today, is it classy or trashy to talk about your money? We hear everybody complaining about their finances, but what about the people who make so much money? Is it kind of weird to hear about it? Do you resent them a little bit? Should they just keep it to themselves? That's coming up on The Scribble, starting right after this.
Isn't it crazy that you wait for payday, but before you know it, you're strapped for cash again? It's time to stop blowing your money and become a smart spender with the book, The Official Guide to Being an American Cheapskate at cheapskatebook.com. Learn simple ways to cut costs at home every day and during special times of the year. Don't go broke at Christmas. Don't remortgage the house for a fancy vacation. The book is filled with tips to save you money throughout the year. Check out the best-selling book, The Official Guide to Being an American Cheapskate at cheapskatebook.com or on Amazon and iTunes.
JB here, back on The Scribble. Is it ever okay to talk about money? Is it taboo? Is it kind of just one of those things? Like, I remember back in the day when I was a kid and you'd talk to your parents about their job and then you'd ask them how much they make. Did your parents ever tell you how much money they made? And this is the thing. For us, we had, there were 5 of us. So my 2 parents, my 2 brothers, and me. 5 of us in a decent-sized house. I mean, it wasn't a mansion and it wasn't a hut. And both my parents worked. They weren't incredibly wealthy, but I mean, they managed to raise 3 kids. Now, my brothers and I are in our 40s, so obviously we're going back quite a time. But we never asked mom and dad how much money they made. It didn't, and because again, it just seemed like that was a rude thing. You just didn't do that. And the same thing happens when you get a job, right? It's always just kind of this secretive hush hush, don't tell anybody what you make kind of a thing. And for me, I know in any sort of writing opportunity that I've had, I mean, I knew very early on that I was going to be a writer. I wanted to be a journalist, a newspaper reporter, basically. But that turned into being a newspaper columnist, and then a commentary, and then a radio host, and then an author, and then so I knew that writing was in it was in me from the very beginning. And any of the writing jobs that I had, I always worked like in a corporate environment, like in an office setting. It wasn't in necessarily a newspaper with other writers. The places where I worked, I was the only writer. So that might have been a corporate office who needed a copywriter, or in marketing, I happened to be the writing person. So I was always the only writer. Now, compared to other people on the marketing team, the writer was generally paid the most, and that's just kind of how it was. So I remember years ago coming into a company, going to the marketing department and listening to the employees bitch and complain about how much they make, but how much they don't make. Really, it was more the angle that they were complaining about. And so I just kind of sat there with my mouth shut. That's something that I've always enjoyed about workplaces, and kind of one of the things that I miss about not, like, my team in broadcast and publishing. We've been together almost about 20 years now. We don't have that sort of whispering of we are just kind of like a family. Like, we're like an old married couple too at this point. But that's something when I've done I've done a contract like to host a podcast or produce a podcast or do corporate communications or do something. I love being around the others who that's kind of the thing that you do at a job, is you complain about how busy you are, how little you make, the boss. So if you do go for lunch with your colleagues, whatever, you're going to bitch about your manager. You're going to bitch about somebody on the team who's not there. You're going to bitch about another department. You're going to bitch about the president. You're going to do all that kind of stuff. That's just a rite of passage when you have a job. But it's interesting. to sit with people and hear them openly talk about their salaries. Now, this is the thing. When you're on a marketing team like that, or lots of teams across different departments of companies, you're going to have a graphic designer, you're going to have a copywriter, you're going to have the email marketing person, you're going to have different roles. So it was always funny to me that you would have, in this instance that I'm referring, there was like one of every person. And so the video guy, he did videography, didn't really have education in it. He kind of came into that role from another department within the company. But he was just so set on making such and such money per year. I don't remember what it was, but it was not close, not even near what he was making. But he kept saying, well, industry standard. That's a crock of shit. I'm not going to say the company that he was at, because people might be able to put two and two together and figure out which company I'm referring to. Those who know my work history and things that I've done, because I think some of them listen to this podcast. But industry standard is one thing. If you are in the movies, if you're in the in the showbiz unions, industry standard is one thing. When you're at a rinky-dink company where you're the only video, and the company doesn't even do video, this just happens to be something extra that they kind of just do on their marketing team. You're not there is no industry standard then technically for that. That would be like, I remember looking into that years ago when I was starting writing. Like, what does a writer make? What would a corporate writer make? What would a corporate copy editor make? It's so different. If you work for Amazon or you live in a big city, New York or LA, I mean, those salaries are going to be different than if you live in bumfuck Alabama. That's just the way things are, right? If it's going to be the cost of living, it's going to be how big the company is, what kind of, corporate writing could be any number of things. It could be that you're just writing blogs. It could be that you're doing PR and you're going to be a media representative. And it could be, you could be writing scripts for safety videos for the government or something. Like, there's just so many different factors. And so when I would listen to these people complaining, and they were, I don't remember how much they were. It was like the early $30,000-ish range. And I had come in to produce a podcast. So I wasn't on the staff. I wasn't one of them. I was kind of sort of like an outside. I was a contract hire, basically. And I came in there and I was making, what was I was making over $50-some thousand a year just to basically host a podcast every 2 weeks. Internally. We're not even talking like a podcast for Amazon or one of these big front-facing audio programs. This was just an internal staff podcast for their company. Yeah, that's how much money I was paid to come. So it was now I'm gonna choke to death. So it was funny to me because I just kept my mouth shut, and I don't know that they included me in the conversation because, again, I wasn't one of them, right? Nobody said to me, "Hey, Jeremy, how much are you making?" Because I wasn't a 40-hour week employee. It was just different. But I remember being in the podcast studio. They even made me a studio to go and host this thing. So I remember being in there, and the video guy ended up being the audio guy at the same time. And whenever we were having a break in the taping, we would tape on I think it was Wednesday, and basically I would be there all day. So I would do a Tuesday kind of compiling thing, sending out emails, kind of lining it up. And then we would basically tape, I think, the first 2 Wednesdays, or maybe it was Thursday, whatever, I don't know. I was there maybe 10 hours a week. And yeah, I was making, $20,000 more than the people who'd been there for 10 years. But again, it's not a good comparison. Somebody who's just going to be sort of an administrative assistant who is kind of the go-to receptionist for a department versus somebody who's been in broadcasting for that long, right? Because your experience also factors into play here when it comes to, a salary, right? It always depending on your experience or whatever. Well, I was in radio for, at that time, probably 10 to 15 years and had an audience of 300,000 and, and I was doing red carpet stuff and celebrity interviews, and here I am. It's almost kind of a step down. So you want that kind of quality then that comes with a cost, right? You pay for that. Now, if you wanted me to be one of those podcasters who can only speak three sentences, and then if you're listening closely, you can hear that there's audio cuts every 10 seconds because I can't complete a thought without having to redo it and say it all over again. Well, then you go bargain basement pricing for somebody who's, I just like podcasting, like the video guy did. Oh, I like video editing. You edited one fucking video, and now you want to be making a 6-figure salary? Buddy, please. Buddy. But anyway, so the point of this story, speaking of well-rounded broadcasters, is it was strange for me to hear people just openly. Now, again, why it was strange to me is, like I said, I've been with my team for 20 years. I haven't been exposed to many other workplaces where that's just a regular conversation that people are having. So tell me, I want to know from you, dear listener, is that something that you talk about with your coworkers? Do you tell your friends? Do you talk about with your friends how much you make? I remember when I did leave that company, they had ended up sort of scrapping the podcast because I don't want to get into it, but their staff couldn't figure out how to download podcasts and things. So it ended up sort of being a debacle, but whatever. Anyway, but I remember staying in touch with 2 of the people from that company. And when one of them ended up leaving about, a year or whatever later, I almost kind of felt awkward because she was complaining about the money. I never got a raise, So I finally said, how much were you making? And this is where that's fair game. You're talking about money. You're talking about never getting a raise. You started this. So then I should be able to ask you how much you make, right? Now, again, it would be different if we were coworkers and I came in 5 years after her and we were doing the same job and I'm a white man and she's black or whatever. I can understand that being a touchy subject then in that sort of situation, but that wasn't the case. And so then she kind of hesitated to answer, but then she just told me. And I was kind of like, okay. And then I started laughing going, I made more than you and you were there for how many years? But anyway, so is it just commonplace now to talk about how much you make with your coworkers? If you make more than your coworkers, do you feel sort of awkward about that? If you know that, or do you tell them that to try to maybe help them and go and say, look I'm making this much? Well, we heard about that on The View when Sherry Shepherd, Rosie O'Donnell, back in that day, that era of the program, the daytime talk show, that they would talk to each other. Rosie would, let people know, this is how much I'm making. This is how much you need to ask for. We're all doing the same thing. We're all doing the same thing. So yeah, sure, somebody who's been there 10 years is going to make obviously more than somebody who's new coming in, but here's what I made when I started. And then you go from there. And so that was kind of cool because they said, we've got to stick together. We're women. We're not going to make the same as men in this broadcasting business or whatever it is. So I understand that. But, I what would that have been like if I would have all of a sudden had a conversation with these employees and go and say, that I'm making like $52,000 or whatever just to come in here for a few hours a week and host a podcast? But that's the thing, right? Unless you're comparing apples to oranges, unless you're doing something that's on the same level, email marketing has different skills than, as I said, a digital graphic designer versus a whatever. So, but I remember when Jeff Probst was on my syndicated radio shows back in the day, he was just starting his daytime talk show. Do you remember he had a talk show back then? That's how long I've been around. And I remember the conversation. I don't remember exactly how we got into it, but I remember him telling me that you don't ask about money. You don't ask about what people make. That was something that he kind of figured out. I don't know if he stepped in at one time and kind of had to, but I remember him saying that's kind of one thing that's off limits. I was tempted in that moment to ask him what he was being paid to do his talk show. I mean, celebrity salaries are kind of often it's, leaked into the news anyway, but it was strange. And for me, when I was hosting my radio shows, I think it was only really, on this podcast because I was already off the top of the charts show already at that point. I think I had retired about a year later is when I only started to open up about how much money I was actually making. Now, at the height of the show, and I've talked about it on this podcast before, I was making about $250,000 a year being an independent radio broadcaster, syndicating my own content to different stations and outlets and licensing content and covering red carpets and, doing all this crap. And that was about 2010 or 2011. Nobody knew that. Right, you'd almost think that would be something you'd brag about to your parents or to your family or whoever. Hey, I made $250,000 this year just being an entrepreneur, just talking, But I never did any of that kind of stuff because again, I just thought that's tacky. You just don't do that, right? You can, and for people who would look at me and go and say, well, you don't really dress nice, you don't really have a big fancy house. Well, but I also, because the money isn't the big deal to me. I just liked doing the radio show. I just liked the broadcasting. I liked the chase of getting advertisers, getting more stations, prize giveaways, celebrity guests, red carpets. I love doing all that kind of stuff. So it didn't really matter. Now, did I have to work my ass off and struggle and starve some weeks because the money wasn't coming in? Absolutely I did. And I'll tell that story too. But I always just kind of felt, whoa, I'm making a lot of money. I shouldn't tell people this because it's going to make them feel bad. It's going to come off as bragging. It's going to be, and I just never did. So it wasn't, think about it. Like I said, 2010, 2011, it's now 2024. Only just in the last year or two, I've started to tell people that. And that's mostly because people are asking when I retired at the age of 39, people are, doing math and connecting the dots and going, wait a second, how does that work? Right. So for me, I've never really talked about that. Now, I went on social media the other day, and I've also talked about how I don't care for social media. I was mind blown about how much people share about income on there. I'll tell you more about that coming up right after this.
Ever had something to get off your chest but never had the balls to say it? That's a load of crap. Speak Free with JB.com is exactly what you've been waiting for. Your chance to tell it like it is and not care what anybody else thinks. Have your say on issues of the day. Join newspaper and radio columnist Jeremy Bradley as he tells it like it is. Hundreds of thousands of people have stopped by, including some well-known celebrities who have had a chat with JB and speak candidly about what's really going on in the world. You can join them too. Have a rant or a rave. Be brave and head on over to www.speakfreewithjb.com now.
It's never too early to start thinking about your next holiday. Have you checked out Mexico recently? From tequila tasting, swimming with horses, to ziplining through the jungle and watching whales and dolphins in their natural habitat, Puerto Vallarta has it all. Visit mexico.jbonair.com to see all the fun PV has to offer. That's at mexico.jbonair.com for hundreds of photos, interviews, and videos from around the tourist hotspot. Check out mexico.jbonair.com for all the fun. That's mexico.jbonair.com.
Money, 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 money. There you go. Everybody's talking about money nowadays, and I think a big part of that too is inflation, the cost of groceries, housing prices, just people just scraping to get by. So obviously it's a topic of conversation, and it's in the news all the time. So why not discuss it here? Discuss it. I'm talking at you, really, and then I tell you an email address to write to me, but it's a one-way conversation, let's be real. But when I was on social media the other day, and I've always hated the term influencer, I always put it in quotation marks when I say it, but I've seen a couple influencers basically flashing up screenshots of how much they make on OnlyFans, and how much they make on this, and how much they make on that. A couple things come to mind. Again, are you bragging? Like, I don't understand the point of this. You're making porn on OnlyFans, and then every fourth or fifth post on Instagram, you're flashing up screenshots of how much money you've made. Pick a lane. Pick a lane, my friend. You're either going to be a porn creator and do all that other stuff, or you're going to be a financial advisor and say, it's just really, and I see the ads on YouTube as well, just, before your video rolls that you want to, you end up having to sit through how many commercials before it plays the 10-second clip that you're wanting to see. But I've seen that too, where people I made all this money on Amazon. It's really weird now that just everybody has these get-rich-quick schemes, and you can do this and do that. But for a quote-unquote influencer to do that, I was kind of, it struck me odd, because that would be I don't even know the names of any porn stars. Ron Jeremy is the only one really I can think of, because I remember having, my name is Jeremy, and I remember people saying that. So that would be like Ron Jeremy coming out if he was in his prime during social media days. But that'd be like him coming and going and saying, I make this much per month. You kind of sit there and go, I don't know that I'm watching him for that. I'm watching him for a totally different reason. And it's a little bit weird. So I enjoy the comments section on an Instagram page. I do. And it's funny because I guess there's a guy that has this reputation of doing that, where he makes porn He was apparently bi and had a girlfriend, and then like a week later, he's all of a sudden in a relationship with this little guy, and they're living together and whatever. And I was like, okay, that's just strange. But I mean, I know how people are with relationships nowadays. You know, they're basically engaged by the second date. And it was funny to read the comments because people, yeah, you've got those who are swooning and like, you know, going gaga over him. But then there's people who are like, it's really off-putting that you just kind of flash up about your money. And then they comment and go and say like, dude, it looks like you're a squatter. Like you don't even really have a home. You're kind of, he talks about, he gives like these fitness, like his diet. He talks about like how much he has this many grams of this, he eats that, and he basically like pulls around like a food wagon, and people are like, you look like you're homeless, like you're just squatting in fucking cheap hotel rooms, but yet you allegedly make over $100,000 a month and blah 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 blah. And it's like, so there's this disconnect, and people are like saying, you know, I just whip out your dick and fuck. Like, that's why I follow, like, that's what I'm wanting to see. That's why I'm on your Instagram. That's why I'm on your whatever. But don't, like, every third post go and say, like, this is how much I make. And it's the struggles of being a gay model. He uses that term too, gay model. And I look at that and go, what does that even mean? What's a gay model? My husband's a gay model, but he's a model who happens to be gay. That doesn't make him a gay model. That's like, I'm a best-selling author. I'm not a gay best-selling author. Like, but a gay model. And he puts it in quotation marks as though he's ashamed of being gay. And people are like, dude, it's gay guys that are on your page. Like, who are you kidding? Don't fuck with us. Like, really. Go fuck your little twink that you've got there. It's not, like, you're not going to snow over your audience because they're already becoming skeptical. And then somebody even said, who just follows this page to laugh at him. And there were so many people that were like, yeah, because it's so cringe. I also learned some lingo that it's cringe. And, but I kind of thought maybe there's a whole nother level now where these influencers brag about how much money they make. Now you have to realize that, going back to my radio thing and how long I did that for 15 years, I still have that money. That's how I was able to retire. But for these people, these creators who do that, like, that's where you kind of have to look at this influencer life as being like a television sort of program. That this is your opportunity now, right? I was on the radio for 15 years. The industry changes, people's like listener habits change, whatever. Radio is kind of dying out. I didn't do anything wrong, but you run your course after a while. And same thing with these influencers. You might be hot shit right now, or be, you know, a top influencer for 2-3 years, and maybe you are making that shit ton of money. Great. And I hope you're saving it or investing it or, you know, whatever you're doing. But this is not going to be what you're doing forever. And I think that these people have such an ego about themselves now that would be like me going into a retail job now and people asking me like what I used to do. Oh, what did you do before this? Oh, well, I hosted a syndicated radio show. I was covering Hollywood red carpets and blah, blah. Like, people would look at me and go, and now you're here you're selling jeans at the retail store? Oh, wow. Okay. I don't know that these influencers would feel comfortable doing that because they're hot shit right now. They're big time. They're making $100,000 a month, man. I can't see them, you know, resorting to then having to get a job when this all ends. If I did not make as much money as I did, and I don't really spend, that's what I'm saying, is that I don't have the big lavish house. We don't have 1 million sports cars. We don't have, you know, a villa in Italy. We don't have all that kind of stuff. But if I was blowing all I would kind of be like, yeah, I guess at like 42 and I'm going back into the workforce, and you know, I would be embarrassed by that. If I was making it rain and going, no, I'm making all this money, yeah, I would be embarrassed. And you know, that's where you look at some of these people and go and say, okay, well, do you own the property that you live in? Are you renting? Do you have, you know, like I said, this guy who allegedly makes $100,000 a month, he's, you know, even in the hotel rooms that he's staying in, well, he justifies that and says, well, I'm saving my money. Excuse me, wait a second. If you're pulling in $100K a month, you could even spend $50,000 a month and save $50,000 a month, and you're still doing okay. So even my accountant, actually, I showed Raylene that the other day, and she was like, that doesn't even make sense. Because yeah, if you're saving $10,000 a month, that's still ridiculous. So it's, you know, it's kind of weird that people are just so free to go and say, I'm making this money. I want to find them in 5 years and see where things are at. Find them in 10 years and go, oh, is he? Because there's websites, that do these where are they now stories, right? Where's that American Idol winner now? Where? Think about somebody like that who wins $1 million on Idol or on a TV show. There's a ton of them. One of them, I think she was back to like busking in a subway, in New York for money, even though she won what was once the biggest music competition show on TV. So you look at something like that, and I wanted to do that years ago with the show Canadian Idol. It was long canceled, but I wanted to do that and talk with all, I don't know how many seasons there were, 5, 6 seasons. And I wanted to look them up and be like, hey, so-and-so from, whatever season, are you still in the music business? Or like, what are you doing now? Because very quickly you have to lose that ego. You are going to lose that ego right quick if that's the case. I was on, a radio show that wasn't a national phenomenon like Idol, where I'm a household name for people. I knew that I wasn't. I didn't have an ego about myself like that. But certainly somebody who wins American Idol, could you imagine how embarrassing that would be for the person? You're all of a sudden the star for like a week, and then you just go. There was an America's Got Talent winner. I can't think of his name. Well, there were a bunch of them. And, when they come up on TMZ or when there's some kind of a story about them, I look at that and go, I met him. I interviewed him. Right now, by the way, as I'm sitting and talking to you in our radio studio here behind me, we call it the Wall of Fame. There's pictures of me on all these red carpets, and there's pictures of me on America's Got Talent red carpet talking to the guy that I'm referring to. And this is my point, is that for the life of me, I can't remember his name. He won the show. He won $1 million. I can't even think. Here's what I remember about him. Let me be honest with you. When I was covering those shows, I wasn't a faithful viewer. I was covering that because my radio audience was listening to was watching those shows, and they were the ones paying attention to the competition. So when I was going to cover the finale, I would get sort of the press pack of like, these are the finalists. This is what they sang throughout the season. Here's what the judges said about them. So I would read up on those notes. For the life of me, I did not know their names going into the covering these things. And so the only thing that I remember about him was he had kind of like a Sherlock Holmes, not a Sherlock Holmes, but like a weird sort of like a hat, like he was a private investigator. He reeked of pot, I remember that. And he kind of seemed, a little bit dazed, if you know what I mean, when we were talking after the show. What's his name? I don't know. He was a singer, I remember that. But have I heard of him since then? No. I mean, I also don't really pay attention, but, you get my point is, like, where are they now? So I could see that being embarrassing. So for these influencers, whenever I see somebody's Instagram bio and it just says influencer, brand ambassador, it makes me want to puke. Makes me want to throw up. Because then, if I then go and look at the links, and if I bring up the link of, it'll have like 5 or 6, it'll have like their Facebook link, their TikTok link, their whatever. When I see that they have a Venmo or a PayPal donation button in their and they're an influencer, honey, you're not an influencer. That's a street corner beggar, is what that is. That's somebody who's got a tin can. You're wanting donations from people. Think about that. You have those people with the cardboard signs outside when you're stopped at a red light. That's what you're doing to your social media audience. Just give me money. Just send me money on PayPal. Send me money. I don't have to do anything. Just send me money. That's where we've come as a society, ladies and gentlemen. And when I was getting into radio back in the day, do we have time now? I see that they're kind of going a little bit squirrely in the corner of my eye here. Wrap it up? All right, I'll do this quick. Back when I was starting out on internet radio, and that was a very new concept. Not many stations had survived. They were kind of just figuring out how to navigate this whole, concept of streaming radio. A lot of the stations had a donate button. Donate to the station. There's no advertising. And very quickly people realized, like, oh shit, we have to have advertising. We've got to have something, because this donation thing, people are like, I can listen to this for free. Why am I going to give you money? And I refused to do that. I said, I'm never going to have my show. I'm not going to put, I ended up making my own website for my radio show. I was not going to have donate buttons. I wasn't going to I'm going to get advertising. I'm going to make this a business. I don't want people just handing me money. I just feel like I'm above that. I'm not going to just go and say, give me my, I really like talking on the radio, so give me money to show your support. This whole thing nowadays, like I said, with with, just Venmo money. Like, I see that with people's birthdays. I see people actually post that. I can't think of the one guy. Oh, coincidentally, by the way, I met him on an America's Got Talent red carpet. He was, again, I can't think of the media outlet he was with. I think it's gone under now at this point. But I remember he was beside me on the red carpet. He sang to Patti LaBelle. He made an ass of himself. We all laughed at him. We're like, who is this fucking creep? And he added me on Facebook, like almost right after. He looked at my name. When you're on a red carpet, you have, your name is on the spot where you're positioned. So I guess he had looked it up or whatever. And then he added me like that night or the next day. And he still pops up on my Facebook page. So I was like, oh, okay, I remember that guy. Let's see what he's doing now. And he's one of those people who it's like, it's my birthday. Here's my Venmo. He basically just tells people, give me money. It's my birthday. And I thought, wow. It's so strange to me. So let me ask you, do you just expect people, random people, anybody out there, anybody listening, anybody to give you money? Is that your thing? Do you do that? Do you? Send me an email. live@jbonair.com. LIVE, live@jbonair.com.
Who are the Kardashians feuding with now? What did that little thug Justin Bieber do this time? Who's getting hitched? And who's headed for Splitsville? Hear the latest celebrity news and gossip every day on Entertainment Wrap-Up. The good, the bad, the ugly, but mostly the ridiculously hilarious. It's all recapped in this daily segment at entertainmentwrapup.com. Have a laugh at the expense of the rich and famous when they take themselves way too seriously. It's 3 minutes of time-wasting fun at entertainmentwrapup.com. Check out Entertainment Wrap-Up at entertainmentwrapup.com. Brought to you by Speak Free Books.
We hear you chirping. Get scribbling. Tweet up the Scribble at The Scribble Show. Join the discussion with Jeremy Bradley. It's all going down right now on Twitter at The Scribble Show and at thescribbleshow.com.
JB here on The Scribble. We have run overtime, and you know the problem with this fucking company? I don't get paid overtime. I don't get paid over. We're talking about money today. I'm not going to get paid overtime. I can go another 10 minutes. I'm not getting paid anymore. I want to talk to the fucking owner of this guy. Oh, that's me. That's called acting, ladies and gentlemen. I could be an influencer. I'm going to be an influencer. You're going to love me. I'm going to make money. Send me my Venmo money. Anyway, my name is Jeremy Bradley. This is The Scribble. I will talk to you same time, same place next week. I think that's a great note to end on. Bye-bye, everybody.
Want more Scribble? Check out thescribbleshow.com for past shows, celebrity interviews, cheapskate tips, and more. That's at thescribbleshow.com and on Twitter at The Scribble Show. The Scribble is a Speak Free media presentation.
If you want some real heat, give your mouth the fire.